Hi, I'm Dave Yoffie. I am with PwC. Happy to join you this afternoon. And we're going to dig a little bit more into how we make the service organization and the customer success organization actually work in a real symbiotic way. Okay, and we're going to talk about a few real-life examples. And I'm happy to share more examples outside of here. We have a little bit of time compression, so I'm going to try to keep the examples to a limit so that we can get to questions. Okay. I lead PwC's national service practice. The fact that I'm here suggests to you that we actually think this is a very important market. We think this is a really important topic. Clearly, it's a little nascent, but it's growing rapidly. In our clients, not just tech clients, this is changing the way they really run their businesses. So I will tell you that this concept of customer success isn't just in SaaS companies, but that I'm dealing with it in clients who are doing banking, who are doing hospitality, and who are doing mutual funds. Okay, so some of the things we're going to talk about, it turns out, are starting to get more attention than what a lot of you may feel because, you know, the folks you talk to often are dealing with a specific set of problems within SaaS, which have a limited amount of investment they can bring, right? I've been doing this idea of customer success for now it's 20-some years. That sounds really odd, but I will tell you that in the mid-90s, we had an extraordinarily successful company that everybody in the company was comped 2/3 of their bonus on how our customers achieved their objectives. So we didn't just deal with, did the product work? We dealt with how well did Delta Airlines do in converting calls into reservations? How well did Dell do with converting calls into PC sales? And that's what we actually measured people on. Okay, so we had 5 stakeholders, and I'd argue all of you do too, in priority order. They're customers, employees, shareholders, business partners, and communities. We have a long conversation later about why the last 2 are there, but they actually are important to your business. But you can imagine my life going to buy-side analysts and explaining why it is that shareholders were ranked behind customers and employees. And I will tell you that consistently we demonstrated that as long as our customer success metrics and our employee engagement metrics were good, that our long-term results were up and to the right, and consistently up and to the right. It wasn't that hard to explain. Frankly, it was often harder to explain to our CFO than it was to our analysts. Okay. So what does that mean? For most of you in customer success for the last 5 years, you've heard a lot about this stuff over here on the right, you know, and the provider view of success. And when you go to get a budget, somebody says, what is this going to mean in terms of renewals? And prove to me I'm getting something back. And suddenly everything starts to feel like you're an extension of the renewal sales department. Now, renewal sales are important, but your customers pick up on that game really quickly. When somebody shows up once a quarter and says, any reason you wouldn't renew? Great, can you check it off that we've had the meeting? I mean, they get the message, right? So customer success is actually moving over to this other column. Customer success is really starting to be about what are the outcomes the customer needs, and what are you doing to enable those things to really be fulfilled? And so when you hear J.B. Woods, or you're going to hear Thomas Law talk about this later today, you hear me give the same speech, this is what the leaders are doing, and they're doing it right, they're doing it well. Why are they doing it? Because the old way of measuring actually, in addition to annoying customers, delivered far too many false positives. What is a false positive? large CRM company. It lands a financial services account, and the apparent adoption rate, sales, usage are going through the roof. High fives all around, bonuses everywhere, until the CEO of that financial services company delivers an email to the CEO of that CRM company saying, I'm stopping all work on the program that's supporting your software. We are moving off your software. How could this be? All of our metrics said usage was great, adoption was great, expansion was great, except that they implemented that CRM for exactly one purpose: to reduce the sales admin and sales ops cost. And all of that expansion that everybody was seeing was actually driving sales admin and sales ops to grow 5 times the rate of revenue. They completely missed the customer's objective. And the day they found out was the day the program ended. And I will tell you that for all the diving catches they attempted to make, it was too late. Okay, among other things, because it would have been a re-implementation from scratch. From a practical standpoint, it would have been nearly impossible to fix. Okay? Okay, here we go. So when I start talking about support, now you get the sense that if we're talking about what the customer needs, we're talking about support that's in the context of how the customer runs their business. So, 3 big elements here. Of course, we want stuff connected and consistent. The modern support model includes those. But in order to integrate with customer success, I have to be able to provide context to the customer's problem. So in one of my line roles, we released a release 7. Some of you may be old enough to remember Windows 7 or remember Mac OS 7, both of which were terrible, and we had a release 7 too. Don't ever have a release 7, skip it, okay? And in my world, what would happen is once a month, this very nice woman with this Texas twang would phone my mobile phone, say, please hold for just a minute for Mr. Dell. And he would rip me for 10 minutes about not the bugs that we delivered, not system downtime, but the revenue that they'd lost in the last 30 days because of the problems that we delivered. That was their context. And if I didn't understand that, I could not be their vendor. Okay. Interestingly, because I did understand that, every phone call ended with, Dave, you've always taken care of us before. You're a part of our success. I know that you will get this fixed. Okay. But have no doubt, that changed the conversation. If this was a bug conversation, I'd have gotten a call from some engineer in a contact center somewhere saying, hey, you better get on it because I think they're looking at alternatives. Entirely different mechanism. Okay, so what happens here when we start to do this? Well, whether this is business units or products or whatever, what I really want you to get out of this is that customer service and support and customer success essentially own the usage lifecycle. High 90% of what your customers are going to do with your product are owned by those 2 organizations, and they darn well better be in lockstep. Okay? If they aren't, first of all, if they aren't, your customers are just confused. They don't think that you really understand them. But just as important, there are really, really big investments that you want to make this work that you can't make if you're essentially investing in these 2 things separately. So how many people here have started to build success playbooks? They're expensive, aren't they? And you guys want a staff to do it? And I'll tell you, getting twice the staff is really, really hard. To your question earlier about how do you introduce major changes really fast, you want an MPI team, don't you? And if you got to have 2 MPI teams, it's even harder. But what I'd also tell you is that it's amazing how much these groups talk to each other and don't have, let's go back to that word, don't have the customer context. In fact, even in sales, what they bring is the deal context. Here are the deals I'm not going to get if I don't get this problem. That's different than getting the usage lifecycle context. Okay? This framework, by the way, is a framework that we see going in across software companies, big and small. In fact, this idea of going from product business units and so forth into frameworks that look more like this, some of the largest SaaS companies out there are doing this in spades. But frankly, I don't care if it's organic or inorganic. The only way that this really makes a lot of sense is if you've got the appetite to work in detail. Okay? You guys know that your customers run out of patience for the broad brush really quickly. Back to my comment a minute ago about the ability to invest. So I'd tell you 2 things happen here in terms of investments. First of all, you'll notice that we put the customer success items, everything from how the customer success runs to the technologies, in the same bar with the service elements, because we really think, and we think experience in the field shows they have to be done together, but you can't take on all of that at once. And so setting priorities and really knocking some of these down and then moving to the next one is actually part of your success in terms of driving success and service to behave together. And what I'd tell you is that almost every working group that we deal with has service and success hand in hand doing each of these buckets. Early on, we don't really blur the lines between the two because they do serve very different missions in some ways. But in terms of building things, we say common architecture, common solution set, share as much as you can share, because both organizations are constantly fighting for how do I get enough budget to do the things I want to do. The other thing I'd tell you is that back to this idea of shared playbooks, and my comment earlier about, gee, what happens if you show up once a quarter and that's what customer success is? The truth is, few of you are actually going to be funded in a way that you can deliver real customer success services to the tail end of your customers. So you're either going to ignore them, or you're going to find ways to use all these service guys as part of, and your service investment as part of that customer success mechanism. And in fact, that is a place where the line between the organization starts to blur. You guys are probably already talking about, gee, we want to automate a bunch of this stuff. Well, the proactive part of what we do starts to look a lot like coaching. And that coaching is really something that's, when automated, it looks exactly the same whether it has a CS label on it or it has a tech support label or a PS label on it. But that idea, from our analytics, we see somebody's not doing something that would make them substantially more successful, would drive cost out, would improve sales velocity, would improve sales conversion rates, would improve tech support closure rates, whatever the thing is. Our playbook can be delivered across now any media, our automated media, our CS media, our tech support media, in a very shared way. And in fact, right now we're implementing a thing where the knowledge base that supports those two organizations is actually the same. And what we've done is we've actually put a different desktop across the two because the words that they have to deliver tend to be different, but the knowledge they have to impart, the key messages, the connections between behaviors are the same. By the way, interestingly, a different conversation, but this whole thing about making sure that you have offerings that support customer success, kind of a big deal too. Okay. So last war story here, and then I'll go to questions. Leader in a new space, software-defined networking, network function virtualization, the idea of taking all these big boxes you buy from Cisco and Juniper and HP and everybody else and turning them into really software is a gigantic market. It's growing very, very rapidly. And the leader in this space says, gosh, we got our stuff in. It does exactly what we told the customers it would do. Adoption freezes, no new orders, and by the way, it's 20% the price of the stuff that they go and do the rest of their build out on. We don't get it. You're going to say, okay, Mr. Customer, you put this stuff in, and there is a part of it that you're really using. We can see you're actually using it. And it doesn't go anywhere else. I mean, it's hard edges to your usage space. Lo and behold, everything that was being approached with these guys was traditional networking talk, speeds and feeds. These guys had no need for software-based networking that was speeds and feeds. Everything was workload-based and application-based. And the minute they said that, everybody in service said, oh, my job just got so much better. I'd much rather talk to these guys about how to do faster deployments of VPNs and how to set up new segments and how to bring new customers on and off of Amazon Web Services in an automated way. I'd rather talk about all those things than how come something had a quality of service level that was 2% below a target. And so the service guys actually stepped back and said, what are the 5 workloads that we see most that aren't getting served? And they took the lead. They told product marketing, these are the 5 we're going after. They built playbooks. They said, here's our value statement. Here's how you bring them up. Here's how you succeed with them. And they actually became the driving force, partnered up with the CS team, because the CS team now actually felt like they could succeed, to completely change the outcomes for the customers, change the revenue curve. All of a sudden, all the things they'd been telling the street were starting to come true. And there was actually a proof point that this new market was going to grow. Something that people were starting to doubt. If the leader couldn't grow, who was going to grow? And it was really just it was an enormous disconnect from the customer. The people in the usage cycle were the ones who solved it. So we have a few more minutes, and I'd love to take any questions you might have. Yeah.
Let me just bring the microphone to you.
You talked about the importance of success and support really being aligned and communicative.
Yeah.
Do you have any strategies, best strategies on making that happen, or things you've done in your experience to make that happen, even tools?
So first of all, I will tell you that we've made great use of tools like Totango and some of their brethren, okay? And we start with the idea of there has to be a shared agreement of what success is for a given customer. And that's embedded in the tools and in the configuration. That, in some cases, that may come right down to a number. This thing needs to come down by 20%, and we can tell with our analytics. In some cases, it's broader. It's just we segment people into cost reduction customers and speed customers and service customers and so forth. So that's number one. We then tend to pretty quickly take the service department off of having primary things like time to resolve. Time to resolve still matters, but in front of that, we put some of the customer, both the customer success and frankly the customer sat metrics, so that speed starts to be, and some of the conformance things start to become third. That's really hard for people who've spent 20 years doing support with the same 5 metrics, okay? But interestingly enough, remember I talked about the priorities? For their staff, it's completely refreshing, okay? Which changes the service that customers get. Other questions? You guys are really easy. Yes.
Just leave the mic.
Yeah.
So you said that between services and CS, there's different times and they can have different missions. How would you define the mission of services, and how would you define the mission of CS?
Traditionally, tech support is getting, over the last 5 years, if you take a look at the CS mission and the tech support mission, so tech support was still getting measured with all the break-fix metrics. How fast did I resolve? PS is, did I make a profit? And there was something in there about attach rates and gross margins. And the customer success guys are all getting measured on this. They're really all getting measured on what's their impact on bookings, renewal bookings, okay, or expand bookings. As those are all trailing indicators, and few of them actually address any drivers of the customer experience and the customer's propensity to change behaviors in a favorable way. And so what's happened is that this idea of start with what are my customers' objectives, let me build playbooks that drive that, not just knowledge bases, but supporting knowledge bases, supporting playbooks that drive those things. And then let me start to go to additional channels so that the customer can start to choose how they're served, whether it's via tech support or customer success. Let me get it the way I want it. All of those things start to be shared infrastructure and shared investment. And if you start with that shared objective at the top, the tree kind of grows in a very intermingled way. Okay, so I think we're out of time. I'm happy to take questions in the hall or wherever if there are additional questions. Thanks very much.